Eh
Hi
bien,
everyone, today I'm going to share with you some ideas on how we could build an eco-friendly web framework. My name is Henrique and I'm trying to become a greener web developer and designer. I'm still learning and getting overwhelmed by the scary complex topic of sustainability. So please let me know your feedback, I'm here to learn. First I want to define what a web framework is. Here I'm talking, we could go into many directions, but here I'm talking about a developer tool for building content-driven websites and web apps, focusing specifically on the front end. Okay, so we are not going to cover databases, permissions, complex APIs, high volume and highly complex apps such as Twitter, GitHub, etc. But instead, we're going to focus on the 95% of business cases out there, from marketing websites to admin dashboards and small social apps. And I know 95% is invented, but most websites need a way to generate HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So that's where we come in with this framework. Our goal then is to conceive a developer tool that can materially reduce the carbon footprint of our websites and apps while still achieving economic goals and be inclusive and accessible. I only have 15 minutes, so I'm skipping context and most of the reasoning behind this. If you want more, then you can go into this URL that I left here. There I have a GitHub repo with a huge document that I went into detail into each of the things I'm going to propose. And also I'm not going to measure things. I'm not going to talk about how do we know if it is materially reducing the carbon footprint. That's stuff for another place. 15 minutes is not enough for that. So it hurts my heart because I really wanted to cover those, but okay. So first, a rapid fire of features. We want to go through what we could build, ideas, directives, etc., to make this framework work, which is fine. But they're going to be very shallow. If you need more detail, go to this URL as well. Okay, so starting off, we want a hybrid operating mode. We would get the best from pre-rendered static content, the best from server-rendered dynamic content, and a little bit of client-side with a lot of caution where needed. And what do I mean by that? First, server-rendered content is... Server-rendered pages are great for dynamic content that is publicly available because then we have up-to-date data that can be easily crawled by search engines. So that includes like leaderboards, social feeds, e-commerce, forums, stuff like that. But it has a problem. If you have low traffic, then most of the time your server is going to be idle. It's not going to be doing anything. So you're going to be using server and wasting energy for nothing. So if you have low traffic, this framework would allow you to go serverless. And serverless is a terrible, misleading name for something that basically means instead of you managing your own server, you let other people manage it. So we would not have a server running at all times. Every time we needed to render a page on the server, we would hit, I don't know, like Amazon, Google, Microsoft, IBM, whatever, asking them, hey, can you render this specific discrete function to get me the HTML for my leaderboard, for example. And then it would only run on demand. We could do some caching to allow it to be reused. The same HTML be reused multiple times. And stuff like that, but then this way we avoid having to maintain a server at all times. A framework that is already doing this is Next.js, coupled with Vercel, their own platform, which is a great example. If you have the time, please look into their documentation. It's really interesting. So this is the idea, but of course, if you have high traffic, you're going to be requesting at all times, maybe serverless without their caching and complex routing and stuff like that. It's just going to be too much overhead and it's going to add more friction and waste and use more energy than the actual server running at all times with you. And so you could choose both ways. Basically, the framework would guide you to either choose serverless or serverful based on your needs. Okay. Then for public content that doesn't change often, we would use pre-rendered / static content. So we would minimize server usage and increase performance because assets would be ready to go whenever someone requested something. it would be just the server would just grab those and send to the user without much time to be wasted. So we would save computations on the server, and we would also speed up the process of the user doing what they want, what they came for, which is very important. So the examples include like blog posts, marketing websites, documentation, which change every once, like a day maximum. Blog posts might, be there forever, and the author never comes back, which is very, very common. But we couldn't like rebuild the website every time a page changes. Otherwise, that would be very wasteful. Imagine like waiting, and especially if builds were slow. Like a build took 15 minutes, and you have a build like 8 builds during the day. Then maybe you are wasting more energy than if otherwise you were just using a server running at all times. So we want to have very fast and incremental builds. So we only rebuild the pages, the routes, the parts of the website that changed, which is very important. Also, like if an asset changed, then we simply change that asset, change the CSS, the JavaScript there, instead of redoing the whole routing structure and getting the HTML, stuff like that. So that's very important, and that's something that static sites currently have a problem with. They aren't very effective in this manner, but still for small websites, that's still very interesting. Then we have client-side rendering for private content that only logged in users can see, that doesn't need to be crawled, or small bits of interactivity in a page. So examples include like an admin dashboard, or complementary features such as comments. So like comments, they are important, but they aren't the main thing. The post is. So we could have the server render the post statically to save bandwidth and everything that we talked about before. And then on the browser, when the user scrolls down to the comment section, if they want, they can click on view comments, and then that's gonna load from the API. And then we are saving a lot because most people don't even care for comments, right? And there is a big caveat here. Before you attack me for endorsing JavaScript on the browser, which could lead to all sorts of bloat, I'm all in for this. I agree it's a danger. So we would have rigorous audits. We would lazy load things as much as possible. Only load them when they come into screen, when the user interacts with them. We will only hydrate parts, the dynamic parts of the app. Hydration is like making into an app of a JavaScript controlled app only the parts that need to be dynamic. We would create the best frameworks to prevent bloat, like maybe you could switch from React to Preact, which is a 10th of the size, or you could use Svelte instead of Angular, etc., etc. Because if we allow developers to create their 700 kilobytes JavaScript behemoth, then we defeat the whole purpose of client-side rendering, because it just becomes more bloat and it drains a lot of energy from the user's device, and that's not what we want. We want to be, again, accessible and approachable, but also eco-friendly. So this would be done with a grain of salt, and we would direct users and educate them as to what should they choose. We would be based on JavaScript for reach. Just a quick reversal. So I hope this is clear, this hybrid approach, this hybrid operating mode. It's a very complex subject, and I myself am still trying to learn it. So if you have any questions, reach out. I know I didn't have much time to go deep into that. That could be a whole talk in and of itself. So I'm just gonna move on, but if you need, reach out. You have my Twitter here on the bottom and my website. Okay, so we would be based on JavaScript for reach, because the bigger it gets, the bigger the framework gets, the more impact it makes, because we have more greener websites out there. And plus there is WebAssembly, so we could eventually bring in external code from Rust, from Go, from C++, whatever, inside of our JavaScript framework. Also, we would be template agnostic, also in the name of reach, and also productivity. Maybe you're more productive with nunjucks and you want to use that, or you're coming from WordPress and want to keep the same PHP templates, then use that as well. We want to give you possibilities, and even like on a page level, if you want to use for this specific page, you want to use Svelte because you're gonna do some client-side rendering. Perfect. But if on this other one, Liquid is enough, then go for it. We want to be as agnostic as possible. Same thing for data. Businesses often have many sources of data. Instead of forcing them to use a single database that is going to be a SQL database and has a strict type of post or whatever, you can use that, but you can also pull from a headless CMS. You can pull from GitHub, from Slack, from MailChimp, from what have you, to achieve the business cases that you have. Okay, so be as agnostic as possible when it comes to templates and data. Also be painless to set up, have a 2-file, very minimal setup, but still allow for limitless depth for advanced use cases. Again, the easier it is to get in, the more reach we can potentially have, so the more impact. We would also do some front-end optimizations out of the box. I'm not going to cover them here, but the biggest one I think would be lazy loaded images and image compression with support for WebP and AVIF formats. We could also do things with CSS, JavaScript, etc. Plugins and extensibility, again, reach and also allow for many business cases. Also provide developers with a more productive way of getting things done. So if you want to pull in data from MailChimp, that's done. It's just a plugin that you install. Of course, there are some concerns about this of how are we going to compensate authors of the plugins? How are we going to make sure they are maintained and stuff like that? But overall, we would have this as a first-class citizen, as well as SEO and social display helpers, because often we make silly mistakes. Not silly, but like mistakes that didn't have to be done because we don't know any better, or because it's really hard to, for example, get a schema definition into your website, so then Google is going to understand it better and suggest it better for users. So we would have things like a favicon generator, meta tags based on a form that you fill in, stuff like that. It's really going to depend on your use case. Also, accessibility and internationalization be provided out of the box. We would do all sort of audits and guidance and teaching to help developers without so much effort build something that is accessible, and if needed, that is provided in multiple languages, because if we can't reach all potential users, we are definitely failing our mission. To be sustainable, we gotta be helping people, and excluding them is not a way to do so. And this could go into all sorts of direction, but you know, if you want to add pages in Portuguese and English and Spanish, then you can do that without too much setup. If you make an error on the HTML that makes it like your form doesn't have a label element, then that's problematic, and we're gonna let you know that and offer some suggestions, maybe a component library for you to build on, stuff like that. Also work a lot on productivity tools like better error handling, whatever we needed to make it faster to build websites with it, because developers have their own personal carbon footprint, and if we can lower the time they are building that thing, then we are lowering the carbon footprint of the thing, right? We would also offer some design and business suggestions, because that's our biggest leverage point. If we can avoid something from being built, then that's the greenest we can do, right? And that also includes design patterns and stuff like that. For example, we could be in the command line when we notice that you're using Google Analytics, show a sad face. Are you sure about that? Maybe server logs are enough. You only care about people hitting your website. Or have you looked into Fathom, SplitBee, or whatever other slimmer analytics tool is out there? Because truly, Google Analytics has a very big carbon footprint. It collects a lot of data. So it could be one approach. We could also go into a meeting and be like, hey, are you sure about this background video? Just have like a robotic voice saying that. Because, you know, we have a lot of design patterns that aren't user-friendly, but yet we include them in almost everything that we do. Carousels with stock photos, videos, background videos that just drain the user's battery and data. That's not nice. So if you can direct people to take better decisions, that's great. Also, like, go on the whole business level, like Uber for trading cards. Are you serious? Maybe you shouldn't do that. And that goes, of course, this is not feasible now. I'm not thinking about implementation, but that's something to think about. What if our developer tools showed us our cognitive shortcomings when it comes to building our things, to prevent us from building the wrong things? That would be great, right? It could also like notify you, are you still developing this? Because in the last 6 months it already emitted X amount of CO2 just for being online. Maybe you want to take it offline because it's worthless. Whatever we have, we could do that. We couldn't necessarily, but some ideas on this matter. And then we also could do some actionable tips for sustainability in the docs, like a crash course on how you can become a green developer. So education, and finally a sustainable governance system that is gonna make sure the tool is gonna keep there and it's not gonna vanish out of nowhere. And if it is gonna vanish tomorrow, then websites using it are gonna have to be replaced in the future. They're not gonna be very maintainable. So that's not very sustainable, right? And so that has to be built in from day zero into this tool. Okay, so finally, these are all the ideas, and they are very nice, right? It's beautiful. What if the computer could tell us that background video was horrible? We wouldn't even have to argue with the client. Would be just like, I don't know, the computer is saying it. But I don't think we need more tools. I think this whole talk is not to build something new. It's just to provide some ideas. And the thing that we really need is education. What we really lack is not code. It's human perspective. We have been brought up in this industry as developers who think that everything is free as long as you are in the free plan and you're not breaking your budget. It's fine. You don't see the impact of what we're building. And then we often get 2 monitors, and I myself am guilty of that. And we are wasting all this energy and carbon, embodied carbon and gear that we buy for things that we don't truly need. So it's not so much of a matter of tools, of a web framework that is gonna make it super easy, like the promised land of it's easy to get performance and sustainability. No, we need to understand, we need to step back and understand what is the impact of what we are building. Do we truly need to build it? How can we use renewable energy to power it? And other questions that if we don't provide education, if we don't go the extra mile to go besides the code and understand that everything there is political and is environmentally engaged and has an impact, then we are going to be failing on building this so-called eco-friendly web framework. So this is it from me. If you feel like any of this is interesting and you want to apply it to your work, I really want to help people with that. I am myself transitioning into this, so please reach out. You have my Twitter here on the bottom, hdorodev, and you can go to my website for all the resources that I use for this and the written version of this, hdoro.dev/sustainability. Yes, thank you organizers for this opportunity. I finally started taking action on becoming a green developer, which is something that I've been thinking of for the past 2 years. Never done anything about it besides, just worrying. And this talk has been my push for it. And it's my first truly original and big talk. So I'm very excited and happy to hear your feedback. Thank you for your time. And if you have any questions, reach me out on Twitter. Bye-bye.